Can you hear me at the back? Yeah? Cool. Let's begin. Today I have the immense privilege of facilitating this discussion about disruptive innovation. And obviously Em's sort of given you a bit of a primer. To contextualise the conversation for starters, I just wanted to ask each of you sort of one at a time, what is your personal interpretation of disruptive innovation? What does disruptive innovation mean to you? Taryn, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so for me it's about a smaller, more nimble, more agile, I won't sit too close to you, more agile company, usually with less resources, being able to challenge established incumbents, I suppose.
Cool, like it. John?
So I come from a background of being a failed entrepreneur, and one of my greatest talents was failing at being an entrepreneur in the energy industry, and so old industries, whether it's energy or water or even sort of government or university, where it's kind of very bureaucratic and very organised, tend to not do things in the best way possible. They do things because it's safe and they've done it that way before. So disruption, how do you disrupt it with technology to actually change the mindset and make things work better? So.
Awesome. John S?
Sure. Yeah, so I guess I agree with both of your descriptions of disruption. I don't really have much more to add. I guess from our point of view, we're an education technology company, and I guess we're not trying to disrupt as much. We're trying to work with what's there, but also create some innovation.
Awesome, cool. That actually segues onto the bit I wanted to ask next, was about, I suppose this is your opportunity to plug yourselves a little more. Can you explain what it is, for everyone here, what it is about your business that you're doing that is disruptive? So, Taryn?
Yeah, I'm probably in a pretty unique position where I have what you would, I guess, classify as the incumbent, Wink Models, which is the first business I established nearly 10 years ago now. And the disruptor. So The Right Fit is an online marketplace that connects creative talent, so models, actors, photographers, stylists, makeup artists, with the brands that need them. So essentially, we are removing that middleman of the traditional talent agency and cannibalising my own existing business. So it's a pretty unique position to be in.
Yeah, awesome.
I reckon I'm trying to cannibalise my own business too. So. The purpose of most of the work we do is in environmental technologies, and Cleantech. Cleantech's a wonderful term, that sort of puts together finance and business and environment. But actually, the role of Cleantech is to disappear. So it should just be main tech. It's kind of the role of my business is to stop.
Somebody tweet that, please.
Yeah. Yeah, there's somebody more famous than me, a lot more famous than me, who used that. So that was the. I'll get to his name. Vinod Khosla used that first. The aim is to put Cleantech out of business. So what we're trying to do, we work with a lot of technology companies across sort of water, waste, energy, carbon, environment, helping them get into it. And it's actually becoming very data rich. So it's it was about building big bits of hardware. So Carnegie Wave Energy in Perth have spent 90 million building big wave turbines. They're just getting revenue. But there's a lot more nimble companies coming through that are data rich, and how do you drive that? So we do that in a number of different ways. One of the things we do is we've run a national accelerator, open for entries at the moment, which targets specific industries. So the best technology for mining, the best technology for manufacturing, for property. We've got medtech in there this year, we've got cybersecurity in there this year, and the top 30 companies go through a mentoring program, all free for the companies, and we could hook you up to industry. We do investor speed dating, which is chaotic and brilliant, and then we take a whole load of people off to China if they want to come to China and play up there. So
awesome,
yeah,
cool.
That's what we do.
And John S.
I guess from our point of view, when we started, we had a look at the kind of environment that was around, and we do 3D design software for 3D printing for little kids, and that was one part of the market that didn't really have many people in it. I mean, 3D printing itself is pretty new, and to the idea of like a 5-year-old being able to do this, there wasn't like really an incumbent in the space. Most of the 3D design software is for older kids or really for university scientists and engineers. So we kind of found a niche that we thought the technology is right. It's at the right spot for it, and the hardware's come along, and we could do something really interesting software. And we just really concentrate on just trying to build our own product and not worry too much about what else is out there and try to do as best we can.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was thinking about this before, that out of the four of us, you're the only one who doesn't really have an incumbent to battle, right? You've kind of found your own little blue ocean in in an established industry, just where no one was looking. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, for us, the thing to battle is, I guess, the education system is generally pretty slow to sell to, so that's our own kind of,
Yep. And
trust to bear.
what was it in particular that made you want to sort of go into this business, or what made you think about this as an opportunity?
Well, my co-founder, Roland, who's here somewhere, had developed this tech, and he was showing it to me at a barbecue, and it was like, oh, this is pretty cool, a little kid can use this and design stuff in 3D, and my wife was a teacher, and she was like, you should take that to school. So I called up my old primary school and said, can we come in? And then from there we saw that the kids were engaged and the teachers loved it, and then we started researching the whole, this was before like STEM became like a thing really, which it has in the last 9 months, but that kind of came around at just the time we kind of started launching, the big focus on it, so it became a nice little confluence of events.
Awesome. Those origin myths are some of my favourite stories. So on that note, I suppose for the two people that have kind of put themselves out of business through their new companies, Taryn, can you explain to us, I suppose, what was the thought process between your old business, and how did you get to this idea to start The Right Fit?
Definitely. For us, it was about looking at the change of landscape in the advertising space primarily. So we were seeing many more requests for small bits of digital snackable content, and that came from obviously a change in advertising dollar spend. There was a lot of brands obviously having to produce a far greater volume of content. There was gone are the days of the big spend TVCs and print campaigns. So we were seeing that content needs to be produced obviously much faster, quicker turnaround times, and on a smaller, more affordable budget, which just isn't viable for a traditional agency to service. On the back of that, we were also seeing a sort of new market of talent emerging, which were these talent who, not essentially social media influencers, but kind of in that space, that they were talent building their own brands online. So whether they are photographers or models or makeup artists, establishing a social presence and building their own brand and wanting to manage their own careers. And there wasn't really a way for them to do that. They didn't fall into a traditional bucket of any of the talent agencies, so they didn't have representation. So it was kind of looking at both of those and trying to find a way that we could build a platform that these talent could create their own brands and manage their own careers online, and connect with the brands that were looking for talent and this latent supply that was there in the industry to connect the parties together so they could work.
Yeah, awesome. I'm really curious about digging a bit deeper into this, because I've always said that I'm in the business of predicting the future of the accounting profession and sort of building business models around that. Were you deliberately looking at trends and patterns in your industry, like before you actually came up with the business model for The Right Fit?
I'd started building tech platforms for Wink models probably about 4 years ago. There was no off-the-shelf solutions that I could find to manage that business. We've got 650 models, so we got to a point where we couldn't scale using manual systems. It was text messages and phone calls to book people in for castings, which is obviously not sustainable. So I started building out products for that manage our payroll, that integrate with Xero, CRM software, booking, scheduling software, all of these sort of platforms. And on the back of that, sort of thought, look, there's an opportunity here to use some of this software along with my domain expertise to solve a broader problem and something that could scale globally. So that's kind of where the idea came from, but it was on the back of, things like social media influencers are really only things we've started talking about in the last sort of 2 years, and that digital advertising spend, it's like $11 billion is spent on digital advertising now, and it's going to surpass TV advertising in 2018. So it was sort of in line with those trends. I knew that there was an opportunity there, but it was really that first foray into tech that sparked the idea.
Yeah, awesome. John O. How did you put yourself out of business?
How did I put myself out of business? I haven't yet.
How are you trying to put yourself out of business? Because you want to be out of business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
When Cleantech becomes main tech, your job's done, right?
Yeah, just put my feet up.
So, what are you doing to disrupt yourself?
So maybe at the beginning, where why did I get going, and kind of so I'll answer the wrong question. So kind of motivation at the beginning was I got really sick of having bosses. So that was one of my main motivations. But there was an awful lot of stuff happening in Europe and North America and nothing happening in Australia. So this was 8-9 years ago. Cleantech just wasn't happening here. So I'd also started doing quite a lot of work in China, and the demand out of China for clean technologies is just ridiculous. So it's kind of, and I was trying to push, slow energy company which starts with an O, into doing something, and and it just wasn't happening. So I was like, right, there's a world out there. You can actually do something really interesting, create a niche that is not being taken, maybe a little bit like the 3D printing, and own that niche, and that's what we've done, and actually do something really useful out of the back of it. So we do, all the stuff we do with companies, all the hundreds of companies that come through our programs, they're actually doing something quite useful. And with the greatest respect, it's not gaming, and it's and we actually don't do anything in fintech, and there is a use to fintech. So, but everything else pretty much we cover, and some of them, particularly the environmental technologies, actually there's a real benefit in it's that they're there to make money, they're there to make a business, but they're actually there to create something, a better world at the same time, and that passion can be dangerous. Because people are there to save the world and not be sensible in business. But if you can harness the passion and create a business that works. So what am I doing to get rid of my own business? I don't know. I mean, I just think that constant disruption. So we're having great fun with battery storage at the moment. So we're working with a big Korean company, helping them get into the Australian market.
Please sort that one out for me. I've burnt through 2 batteries today.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, so this is sort of big batteries, EVs and homes and factories. And we're going into Origin and AGL, and we're, it's really fun. We're also doing some stuff on water and, different ways to source water and sell water. And so, I don't think actually that what we do is not going to disappear, but actually how do you disrupt the incumbents is fun.
Is your total MO.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm very mindful about sort of adding value to the audience today. So I think my next question is going to be along the lines of, for the people watching at home, John S., what would be the number one tip that you've got so far as going into an established market and disrupting that? Like, if you were just sitting side by side with a new founder who says, I want to disrupt X industry, what would be the number one piece of advice you'd give that person?
Well, I mean, I guess I can't really talk to every industry, but as far as education goes, I mean, it's relatively slow market. You have to get in with people, and it's not so much, as I said earlier, about disrupting as trying to work with people. I mean, the Australian education system I didn't really rate. You tend to be a bit South Australian, you don't rate stuff you've got, until I went and looked everywhere else, and actually South Australia's got a great education system, and most of it's really, really great, but it can always be better, and unless we keep trying to make it better, it'll stagnate. And this whole thing about STEM has been a big kind of, key buzzword thing for a while, and just the other day I was talking to someone, and I've never really connected these two things, so directly, but South Australia's won this submarine contract, which is, I think, $50 billion, whereas the last submarine contract was like $1.5 billion contract, $5 billion. So $50 billion means that we'll be building submarines in South Australia for the next 50 years. So who's going to build them? And the guy I was talking to said that at the moment, where they train these people is in the submarine people are like in Scotland. And it's like kind of a little bit ridiculous, right? And it's like, well, the people who are actually going to be designing submarines in 20 years are like 5 years old now, right? Or less. And so unless we skill up now, we're not going to be able to meet that need. And we're going to just, we're bringing people from Scotland here or Korea or somewhere else. So I didn't answer the question at all.
No, I think you did. You just didn't realise it.
Don't worry about questions.
So for all of you playing at home, I think the most valuable takeaway from that was, like, if you're sitting down with the founder, what John would say to you is just, like, keep improving things. Yeah, I think that's a very valuable sort of attitude to take. I mean, you look at the changes in technology, and I think, Scoble's talk was sufficient to that. Like, the pace of change and innovation globally across all industries is accelerating faster and faster. So as long as you keep improving and keep getting better, I think, you're going to be disruptive by virtue of that. Now, Taryn, on to you. I'm very curious about, in your industry, how has, I suppose, the modelling industry received you? Have you gotten any flack or fallout from what you've been doing? Any haters?
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Tell us about that.
Like any industry that's going through change, there's always people that are fearful. There's people just, as a general rule, don't like change. They don't like anything that's different. You have early adopters who absolutely love our platform and are wholeheartedly on board and can see the value that it adds. And then obviously on the other side, there's people that are really scared of what it's going to do to the industry. It's a marketplace. It puts the power back in the hands of the end users. They can dictate their own pay rates, their own schedules, and that does remove a lot of friction from the marketplace, but obviously it removes a lot of the control that these middle parties have always had. So yeah, we do get a lot of flack. We do have a lot of people scared about the long-term implications, and I think like any industry that's been disrupted, it's just about seeing that through. And yeah, it is difficult times. It's about getting comfortable with that discomfort. I think has been the biggest thing that I keep saying to our team is that you've got to get comfortable with that discomfort. And
well, that was going to be my next question, is like, how do you personally actually deal with that? Because I'm sure these people were colleagues or friends within the industry who have now kind of, turned around and just gone, what are you doing? You're ruining it for everyone. Is that right?
We've been really lucky. Overall, the feedback's been incredibly positive. People can see that what we're trying to do, and I guess I'm probably lucky in the sense that I've had 9 years of owning an established agency and lobbied really, really hard for change in our industry. For the betterment of talent and the betterment of clients, and that. So on the back of that, I am well respected in our space. So I think that does make a difference. I think it would be different if I didn't have that background.
If you were like completely out of nowhere.
Absolutely. Yep. But yeah, no, it is difficult. Personally, I do definitely the first few weeks. I mean, you take those online social media comments really personally, and you've got to learn not to. That was definitely a challenge for me. But I think people can see what we're doing is improving the industry. It is making, it's allowing clients to book more jobs, more campaigns, and it's allowing talent to earn more money than they were able to do previously. So it really is empowering both parties. It's just allowing people to see past that change.
I think that's a really important takeaway, is having that established presence and respect within the industry that you're planning on disrupting, I think would make it a lot easier to actually go in as opposed to coming out of nowhere. I'm interested in your context on this, John O, about how have you been received in what you've been doing by the marketplace? Any death threats?
No, I mean, there's been some really interesting work we've done recently with the gas industry about, just sort of sitting there just going, yeah, you're a transition fuel. Transition's not a good place to be, because the transition means there's nothing at the end. So you start reinventing yourself, guys, because otherwise, you're not going to be there.
Well,
so,
on that, are these
challenging.
companies in sort of non-renewables fully aware of this, and are they looking to you for help, or are they just kind of covering their ears, going la 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 la?
Both, yeah.
Bit of both, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some tensions within those organisations where some people can see going, actually, the world's moving really fast, and others going, no, we've been doing this for years. It's not. Don't worry about it, son. Sort of. It will. Yeah, that's right. So yeah. I mean, it's kind of there's clearly. I mean, there's massive dynamics, and maybe a little bit like Finn told in the session before, but it's it's a very conservative type of industries, and and safety first, and we built that pipe in 1922, and why would we do it differently this time, and that sort of thing, and it can be quite challenging. And one of the sort of the how do you handle was the previous question, but so I've got a tendency to be a control freak and a perfectionist, which is really bad and really good, and so running a startup myself is kind of actually that's really difficult, because you go off on tangents and you get pulled here and you get pulled there, and all that uncertainty, and it took me quite a few years to just feel it's okay, it's kind of, and just chill out a bit, it's kind of, it's okay, it's nothing's going to go to plan. The only certainty is nothing is going to go to plan, so that's all right, so, but as long as it's going in the right direction. So.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's an interesting point you made about sort of, the companies sort of that you're working with not operating in unison. There's a bit of an internal conflict that they have to manage. John S., in terms of like your personal challenges, how have you been received by schools and by vendors? Is it with open arms, or have you had some resistance?
No, it's generally very positive, so we don't really have... Yeah.
I figured 3D printing for kids, like who's going to be against that, right?
Yeah, no, we've been lucky. We've had great support.
Yeah. But I suppose it's all well and good to get people welcoming you with open arms with your technology, but how have you found the sales sort of cycle in your business?
Yeah, I guess, I come from an engineering background or tech background, so it's been brand new. Actually, this morning I was in like a sale, like how do you cold call people course thing, and they had like live people calling, and they're like, what did that guy do wrong? And I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. But, I never knew I would be in a course like that when I started, but and I'm not the sales guy in our company at all really, but I was with the sales guy and I'm just trying to learn it because I need to understand how it works. And it's like, I'd said something, it's like, don't say that, that's a fear word. And it's like, oh, don't, I'm like, geez, I've never knew there were so many things. And it's like, it's way more difficult than tech guys tend to be like, have a bit of a superiority kind of complex sometimes. I don't know.
There's something mentioned about that.
I don't know, but you think, the sales guy, that's easy, but it's just really not. And it's like, so that part of it has been the steepest part of
what just you personally learning about
yeah,
sales?
And no one in the team knows sales. So everyone's like, we're just reading books, taking notes. It's like, don't know what we're doing, but
we work with a lot of tech companies, and one of the things we work on is communications. So it's there's from a number of points of view. So actually you have to speak the language of the customer, whoever that is, whatever. But also it's just get it. No one cares about your technology. No one cares how it works.
How much money is it going to make us?
And what's it do it for me? Yeah. So actually, how do you reframe that and help people communicate in a different way?
WIIFM or something like that. That's the radio station.
Yeah.
I was going to ask the audience, hands up if you're in sales. Just quick show of hands, right up in the air, like you just don't care. It was a trick question, guys. You're all in sales, right? It doesn't matter what you're doing or where you're doing it. It's like everyone is in sales all the time, from your tech lead, from your salesperson to your CEO to your CMO. Everyone has to be in sales. So I actually see it as a core competency across the board, and I think that needs to be like hardwired into startups' DNA to actually. As opposed to, that's how you disrupt, right? Because you're coming in as sort of this little minnow in a big pond, like you have to sell and you've got to hustle, right? So on that, Taryn, can you give us a few stories about in your early stages with the right fit about what you did from a sales or a hustling perspective to kind of get that initial momentum?
Yeah, we utilised PR. That was a really great one for us, obviously. A bit of personal branding really, really helps. People want to identify, especially in the tech space, and something that is an online platform. They want to know who's behind it, and they want to know that there's some authenticity and a personal brand behind that, and that really reassures people. So working on personal branding, getting it out into the general press, doing a lot of trade interviews, that was a really important part of our launch strategy. Yeah.
And John O'Brien, in terms of getting that first momentum?
Yeah, so PR, but never paying for it.
Always, right?
So we've done a huge amount of stuff around the country and now internationally, I've hardly paid for anything ever. It's kind of
good.
It's kind of how do you create something? So one of the things we did really early on was we started doing network events. So we'll get someone else to pay for a network event.
Beautiful.
I'm the MC. We get people to come and pitch. We get the first two we did in Adelaide, then we started in Sydney. The first two in Sydney were hosted by the ASX and Macquarie Bank.
Beautiful.
And everyone was coming, and it was like my mates at Macquarie, my mates at ASX. And just from that point of view, but never paying for it. Get someone else to pay for it.
You've just touched on something inadvertently, is that kind of inferred or implied credibility by partnering up with bigger players in like aligned industries. Would you say that's fair?
Absolutely, yeah. And you build that credibility. So even through the competition thing we're running, closes 11th of July. We've got a whole lot of people on there who are partners, and so John O'Brien, who the hell's John O'Brien? But it's like, oh, okay, shit, we've got the federal government, we've got this, we've got this.
It's that like, inferred credibility, right?
Credibility, yeah.
I was going to ask you, John S. You've gotten a ton of media, which is great for an Adelaide boy, right? Has that translated to phones ringing for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more inquiries, and I think for us, more like we went to the big education conference 2 years ago, and like primary school teachers, maybe 20% of them had heard of 3D printing. When again last year, and maybe like 50%. But I think by the end of this year, every primary school teacher in the country has probably heard of 3D printing, and will hopefully start associating with Maker's Empire, and we can, I mean, it's we just got really lucky, I think. Right place, right time.
I just want to drill in a little more. Like, how have you gotten your first few customers? Has it, like, I don't think, like, you've gotten great press, but that's not necessarily going to translate to customers in your industry. Have you just had to pound pavement?
Yeah, pretty much. First 30 schools were, maybe 40 schools were face-to-face, just going out and visiting people.
Yeah, because I liken selling to government kind of the same as enterprise sales. So just on that, for anyone in the audience that's in sort of enterprise or government sales, like, was it a sort of one-size-fits-all type proposition to actually getting to these decision makers?
Nah, actually one of my co-founders, he's like, he doesn't have kids, but because we're in school, so he was like, oh, there's a principal's tour of like Emmanuel where prospective parents can go along, and he went along and he's like, yeah, that's good, and then get to the tech workshop space, and he gets the tech guy and goes, so you guys have 3D printing?
3D printing?
Like, here at Emmanuel, and they're like, no, you really should think about that. I mean, I don't know about my kids. I'd really want them to be involved in a high-tech school, and then, like, he gave them a call a few days later and said, you guys interested in 3D printing at all? And then the principal, so it was a fair bit of hustle.
I hope you all were taking notes for that. That is the best hustle I've heard in a long time. Oh, that's great. I'm glad I asked that question. How are we doing for time, guys? 2 minutes? Okay, so I'm going to use my 2 minutes wisely for everyone in the audience. Closing remarks, if you had to give one tip, and this is completely, forget disruptive innovation, just one tip, your number one tip for founders out there, what would it be, Taryn?
Ooh, build a great team. I think hire people that are smarter than you. In my first business, I was very, very resistant. I'm a control freak as well. I'll totally put my hand up for that as well. I was very resistant to handing over responsibility, to delegating, and you just can't do that in a startup. You have to find people around you who are smarter than you, whether that's a tech co-founder or whatever it is, the best sales and marketing person that you can find. All right. Yeah, build that team.
Cool. John O'Ryan.
And I'm also not very good at following instructions, so I'll answer with two answers.
All right.
Firstly, ask the market. So even if you're nowhere near selling anything, go and ask the person you think might be a customer.
I'm glad we covered that, actually.
What do you want? Because there's an awful lot of tech people out there doing technology push. And
Please stop building stuff that people don't want, right? Ask the customers.
But so the biggest thing I would say is network. Go and to as many. You can get a lot of free beer if you do that as well. Yep. But go to as many events. So actually, there's.
Awesome. You're at one right now, ladies and gentlemen.
Bonnie Sheck from Hong Kong Trade and Development Council, who's sitting down there. I met at a Hong Kong event. Tech companies going into Hong Kong. Go and talk to Bonnie. Give us a wave, Bonnie.
Wave. There she is.
There's a whole lot of free stuff you can get in Hong Kong. But we met at an event, cool. And I signed an MOU with the Hong Kong government last year to do tech transfer. It's kind of just network. So.
John, last piece of advice.
I like Taryn's thing about team. I've got 3 other founders, and we tried to get people with different skills, and they're great. At least 2 of them are smarter than me. I'll let them decide if you're out there.
I hope they're not here, right?
You can figure that one out, I think. But they're all smarter than me.
So we've got team and we've got team.
Definitely team.
Yep. And we've got network. And what was the other one? Market. Ask your customers first. And mine, I think, on closing would be to build the most epic LinkedIn profile ever. Because I think in the pursuit of an epic LinkedIn profile, you basically build an epic company. That's basically a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. You've been a wonderful audience. And thank you to our panelists. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thanks, Chris.
Awesome.